You guys will know I'm not much of an English patriot. All my family are from Ireland. A lot of my family fought in Republican movements in Ireland. So it's safe to say I don't have a high opinion of England. But it did do one good thing, and that is defeat German Nazis in World War II. German Nazis, who in my opinion never faced proper accountability for their crimes, rewarded actually for being anti-communist after the war, people who oversaw the deaths of thousands put in leading positions in NATO and NASA. Hundreds of thousands of actual Eastern European Nazis were given safe haven in places like Canada and the United Kingdom, which of course has come up a lot recently when we're talking about Ukrainian stuff. And in my mind, Germany actually have never properly apologised for World War II, thanks in part because the Allies let them off. But your average Joe who fought in the British Army against the Nazis, they did fight to end this fascist empire. My own family died fighting the Nazis back in the day. And seeing what Germany is becoming in its crackdown on pro-Palestinian protesters and just Palestinians in general makes me want to start chanting with my English football hooligan brothers, 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup. Because people need to remind Germany that it's not okay you go full Nazi again, even if you're using your past to actually do this. So what is happening in Germany at the moment is something that I guess has been in the works for a while since unification, because East Germany was one of the most pro-Palestinian countries in the entire world. But after unification, it of course joined one of the most pro-Israeli countries in the world because of this collective guilt from World War II. Because Germany perpetuated one of the worst crimes in all of human history. Of course, the worst anti-Semitic crime ever, killing 6 million Jewish people in the Holocaust, millions of other undesirables, gay people, Romani, black people, trans people, people they didn't like in these camps as well. And because of that, they feel like they have to support Israel no matter what, because as we've all been talking recently, conflating Zionism with Judaism is super dangerous, but it's literally what the German state has been doing since the founding of Israel, because they see their support for Israel as some sort of apology for the crimes of the Nazis. And we take that to 2023, where they're using that to smear people who are against apartheid and genocide and crimes that often resemble the Nazi crimes. You've seen lots of anti-Zionist Jews describe the actions of the current Israeli army similar to the Nazis, and of course the stark comparisons with the Warsaw Ghetto and Gaza itself. It seems that Germany is using its history of fascism and genocide to unapologetically support and enable fascism and genocide in 2023, and they're taking it to such a level they are considering that to become a German citizen, you have to pledge support to Israel. A country thousands of miles away in the Middle East. To become a German citizen, you must support Israel, because if you become German, that means you also must feel guilt for what the Germans did in the 1930s and 40s. And what this actually reminds me of is like the hysteria around critical race theory, which is funny because the right-wing fearmongered that if you teach kids critical race theory, what they meant is teach kids the horrible history of the United States. Then white children will feel forever that they are guilty of doing these things, even though they had nothing to do with them, but their ancestors did, and they say they hate that. But in Germany, what you have is people who were born decades after any of this happened, still feeling guilty about the Nazis, therefore supporting Israeli genocide as some sort of an apology. And that is the stuff you think they would hate as well. But the right wing, who say they hate critical race theory for this very reason, they actually like it when it comes to Israel. Supporting all this stuff because you feel guilty for what your ancestors did, because your schools taught you should, I thought the right wingers hated that. But apparently when it comes to Germany, they don't. Quick little tangent, stuff like this is obviously demonetized, so if you want to support videos like this where I can just be completely unfiltered, just consider supporting me on Patreon and I can make more videos like this. But if you guys haven't been following German politics over the last couple years, it's just not okay when it comes to internal fascism anyway. Of course we had in 2022 an apparent attempted coup d'etat by the far-right Reichsbürger movement, and it actually included some people who'd been in the AfD, Germany's biggest far-right party. There's been a crackdown on Marxist and socialist groups because they believe following the works of actual German philosophers and political theorists is actually against the nation state of Germany. They've been ramping up arms sales to Israel while they've been doing this genocide, and Berlin criminalised the slogan "from the river to the sea." And of course, with the German far-right surging, it's also been exposed that loads of people working in military intelligence, the armed forces, and the police are also all neo-Nazis, right? So denazification in West Germany and unified Germany seems to have been done very, very well, where you have both the far-right rising, and then you have the whole rhetoric being extremely Islamophobic against refugees from North Africa and the Middle East, and now you have a crackdown on anyone who is pro-Palestinian. So let's just get into some recent headlines before we go into the history of this stuff and talk about how German children are actually taught about Israel in school. This tweet by Tracy Fuad said, "The Berlin Senate, which gives generous funding to artists and arts organisations, has announced that all recipients of funding must sign a clause which amounts to declaring support for the State of Israel. I've been lucky to receive a number of grants in support of my writing, including from the Senate. I've never had to sign any clause about my political allegiances. The Senate is spinning this as an anti-discrimination clause, which is misleading. The clause is only about anti-Semitism. Singling out the Jewish people cause among the many forms of discrimination in itself is problematic and troubling. None of this is making anyone safer, least of all Jewish people in Germany or abroad, and will have a profound chilling effect on the once vibrant arts and cultural scene in Berlin." And as we're going to get onto a bit later, some parts of Germany are actually saying if you want to become a citizen, you have to pledge support to Israel. So very fitting that to become a German citizen, you have to pledge allegiance to a state of apartheid and genocide, just like the German state 90 years ago, right? But wait, there's more. Over 170 armed police officers raided 8 targets in Berlin during crackdown operations against pro-Palestinian organisations. Germany is the crackdown epicenter against Palestinian activism. During the early hours of the morning, and this is on December 20th, 6 left-wing activists were pulled out of their beds at gunpoint by Berlin police. The operation targeted the anti-capitalist women's organisation Zora, which has recently mobilised across national borders against Israel's war on Gaza. In a statement, Zora spoke of violently applied handcuffs and apartments being completely turned upside down. The youth women's organisation called the armed raids a new stage of state repression. The pretext for the long and unprecedented raids was Zora's alleged position on the Palestinian Marxist PFLP, which is currently engaged in guerrilla resistance in Gaza against Israel. Just DW also reporting the GDP police trade union representative for the Berlin area, reminder that the only bad union is a cop union, wrote on X that 200 officers took part in the operation and searched 6 flats, an office and a cafe, and 5 of the suspects belonged to Zora. Also, in response to a lot of the protests, German police have also been setting up control zones in Berlin neighborhoods known for having Palestinian communities. So yeah, the state repression against pro-Palestinians and Palestinians is reaching like a new stage in Germany, where they are busting down your door and shoving a gun in your face if you support the cause of Palestine and if you happen to also be left-wing as well. Seems like Germany has really learnt nothing from its history, despite everyone in Germany being absolutely hysterical about it, where every single German is told to believe they are personally responsible for the crimes of Adolf Hitler. And this also applies to German leftists who are also pro-Israel. You get many left-wing football clubs in Germany who are great on things like capitalism, but when it comes to Israel, they're all waving Israeli flags while they do a genocide. Because for left-wing Germans, a lot of them see it as some sort of land back movement. You support Israel because you support Jewish land back, like you're supporting Native American land back or something like that. But here's another thing that's been happening recently, and this is back in August. This debate has ramped up even more recently because of what's been happening. But again, this is in August. Germany debates tying citizenship to Israeli loyalty. So Saxony-Anhalt, a state in Germany, has done what many around the country are calling for. If you want to be a citizen of Germany, you need to pledge allegiance to Israel. effective immediately, those applying for German citizenship in the east central state of Saxony-Anhalt must declare their support for Israel's right to exist. This commitment is part of new language that State Interior Minister Tamara Reischang informed relevant authorities about in a ministerial decree this week. Failing to do so would deny naturalisation to foreigners who would otherwise fulfil the necessary conditions for obtaining German nationality. Under the new guidelines, applicants would have to sign a declaration that they recognise Israel's right to exist and condemn any efforts directed at the existence of the State of Israel. A more thorough check of anti-Semitic attitudes would also be part of the naturalisation process. So just to make it clear, that isn't Germany itself adopting this, it's just Saxony-Anhalt, but at the same time, you know, it's something that is gaining more traction while Israel is doing genocide. Like, this is becoming an issue more that people support because Israel are doing even more terrible stuff. So yeah, to become a naturalised citizen of Germany might soon require you to pledge allegiance to a foreign country, which has nothing to do with Germans at all, really, at this point, since nearly all of them were born after the Nazi period. Sure, there are a few left, but if you're immigrating to Germany, why are your views on Israel relevant at all? This, like, hysteria in Germany for supporting Israel is just, like, blowing my mind so hard. But as we're going to get into, there is a reason why a society like this just will unapologetically support genocide, apartheid, all these human rights violations. Not only that, will give this country 10 times as much weapons as they were already giving it to conduct this. And that's because of how Germans are taught about their collective responsibility to Zionism generally and the Zionist apartheid colony. So let's get into this a bit more. So an article on The New Yorker by Masha Gessen, In the Shadow of the Holocaust, explains the politics of this a bit more. So Germany has long regulated the ways in which the Holocaust is remembered. In 2008, Angela Merkel spoke before the Knesset on the 60th anniversary of the founding of Israel, and she emphasised Germany's special responsibility not only for preserving the memory of the Holocaust as a unique historical atrocity, but also for the security of Israel. This, she went on, was part of Germany's reason of existence. This sentiment has been since repeated in Germany seemingly every time the topic of Israel, Jews or anti-Semitism arises. So in 2018, the country created the Office of the Federal Government Commissioner for Jewish Life in Germany and the Fight Against Anti-Semitism, a vast bureaucracy that includes commissioners at the state and local level, some of whom work out of the prosecutor's offices or police precincts. Since then, Germany has reported an almost uninterrupted rise in the number of anti-Semitic incidents. But the statistics mix what Germans call Israel-related anti-Semitism, such as instances of criticism of the Israeli government, with violent attacks. Also, there are now dozens of anti-Semitism commissioners throughout Germany. They have no single job, description, or legal framework for their work, but much of it appears to consist of publicly shaming those they see as anti-Semitic, often for criticising Israel. Hardly any of these commissioners are Jewish. Indeed, the proportion of Jews among their targets is certainly higher. These have included the German-Israeli sociologist Moshe Zuckerman, who was targeted for supporting the BDS movement, as was the South African Jewish photographer Adam Broomberg. And then in 2019, the Bundestag passed a resolution condemning BDS as anti-Semitic and recommending that the state funding be withheld from events and institutions connected to BDS. The history of the resolution is telling. A version was originally introduced by the AfD, the radical right, ethno-nationalist and Eurosceptic party, relatively new to German parliament. Mainstream politicians rejected the resolution, but only because it came from the AfD. The resolution was unbeatable because it linked BDS to the most terrible phase of German history. For the AfD, whose leaders have made openly anti-Semitic statements and endorsed the revival, Nazi-era nationalist language, the spectre of anti-Semitism is perfect. Cynically wielded political instrument, both a ticket to the political mainstream and a weapon that can be used against Muslim immigrants. And I think that last bit sums it up perfectly, in that Germany is doing all this stuff, and they're not all right-wingers doing it. It allows the far right to come in and start attacking Muslim refugees, saying they are all anti-Semitic Nazis, and we can't have that, can we? Despite the fact people in the AfD are actually Nazis themselves. And that's the same in Britain. You get absolutely far-right fascists all supporting Israel because they love Israel brutalising Muslims, At the same time, they are some of the most anti-Semitic people in society. And that's what it does. Like you saw there, unelected commissioners going around calling people anti-Semites for criticizing Israel, linking actual anti-Semitic violent hate crimes to criticism of Israel and logging them down in the same statistics, right? They are both anti-Semitic incidents, basically put them in the same category. This is absolutely just insane fascism. And it just shows you why this stuff is so dangerous and why teaching people history and teaching a whole society history needs to be done properly. Teaching Germans about the crimes of the Nazis and how it became a Nazi state is obviously something that needs to be done. Doing that while telling everyone they have a responsibility to support Israel as an apology for the Nazi regime is absolutely insane, and of course leads you into these problems where AfD Nazis are proposing stuff in Parliament, which they say is like fighting anti-Semitism, but they're just using it as some sort of anti-refugee, anti-migrant policies and stuff. But you kind of have to go along with it, because if you don't, it makes it look like you actually aren't fighting against the German version of anti-Semitism, which means criticism of the Israeli government included. Now, of course, we've been talking a lot about like German society and how they're taught about the war. But what we don't really understand, I guess, is how they are often taught about Israel, and more importantly, how are they taught about Palestine? Are they taught that like a Palestinian society existed in Palestine before Zionism took over? Does anyone know about that? Now, there was a good article by Heb Jamal, How Palestine Became a Forbidden Word in German High Schools. And here is some first-hand accounts of what it's like to go to German school while you are Palestinian. So the word Palestine was strictly forbidden in my classroom. Dalia Vakili, a Palestinian German, recalled in an interview with Plus 972 about her secondary education experience in the federal state of Lower Saxony. Whenever I would mention that I was Palestinian, my teachers were outraged and said that I should refer to Palestinians as Jordanian, she said. Vakili is not alone. Several more current and former Palestinian German students have told Plus 972 about experiencing discrimination and censorship in the classroom on the basis of their Palestinian identity, and feeling that there is no room to disagree with how Israel is presented in their school. Mariam, a 12th grader in Saxony, told Plus 972 that she was interrupted by a teacher when talking about her Palestinian background and told that she was Israeli. That was a really painful experience for me. My teacher implied my identity just didn't exist. Mariam has been accused of being anti-Semitic because of her pro-Palestinian beliefs, including by her peers. The discourse in Germany is extremely pro-Israel. Every criticism of Israel or its political system is seen as anti-Semitic and is denounced, even by fellow students who feel emboldened to call me anti-Semitic for holding anti-Zionist views. I know being pro-Palestinian doesn't mean I'm anti-Jewish, but I'm careful who is around me when I talk about my identity or my experience as a Palestinian in this country, because I'm afraid of discrimination. I would need to be very careful about the exact things I say, said Sharuk, who is now an undergraduate student in Berlin. I was told not to speak about Palestine by a teacher because according to them, I would not be able to stay neutral. That stuck with me. I wish Palestine was addressed in a way that simply respects the Palestinian community, especially in a country where there are so many Palestinians. Thomas Lang, now 22, recalls mentioning the Nakba to his teacher in school in Bavaria. He just accused me of anti-Semitism and said the Nakba was an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Lang told Plus 972, any discussion about what really happened with the creation of Israel was futile. I had to do my own research because otherwise we were only taught a ubiquitous narrative of Israel being an underdog against these Arab countries who wanted to annihilate it for being a Jewish state. According to those who spoke to Plus 972, much of its hostile atmosphere can be traced back to government-led programs and official school material that promote a pro-Israel narrative in the classroom while shutting down dissent. And while the education system in Germany is left up to the discretion and authority of its 16 federal states, the push to present Israel in a positive light, while silencing discussion of Palestinian oppression, is a consistent factor across them all. This endeavour is backed up by the intensive efforts to promote contact between Israeli and German students without setting up similar engagements with Palestinian students, the removal of discussion of the occupation from classrooms, and well-funded projects aimed at training German teachers in Israel. So I'll link the article in the description because I don't want to just read it all out, but it is very good because it goes on to talk about how textbooks have been edited to become more pro-Zionist, how there are actually these like massive funds to send German teachers to Israel. And when I was reading that, and I was reading that like terrible testimony from the students, it reminded me of like, in some ways, like residential schools in North America. It reminded me of how in settler colonies and in colonized nations, people are often told that their identity does not exist. It's erased. And you get that in places like Ireland, North America, like I said. But what's absolutely bizarre is that these aren't Palestinians being taught in an Israeli school. These are Palestinians being taught in a German school. This is not even where the colony is, and they're still being told your identity doesn't exist. A terrible ethnic cleansing that happened with the founding of Israel, that's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Your mere existence as a Palestinian, your identity as a Palestinian, is in fact anti-Semitic. And that's where we're at with Germany, where teachers can say this to Palestinian students with no repercussions, because the whole country is in some sort of mass hysteria that any sort of criticism of the Israeli government's genocide is somehow anti-Semitic, meaning you hate all Jews. Coming from the country that is responsible for the biggest killing of Jews in recorded history, right? This is the country telling us that if you criticize genocide going on right now, you're actually someone who hates Jews coming from the country that actually did a genocide of Jewish people. The irony isn't lost on me that the German government and the German nation, which hasn't apologized for what it did, in my opinion, properly, thanks to geopolitical reasons and the Cold War, is now going around saying all this stuff. Is raiding Marxist women's groups that are pro-Palestine, shoving guns in their faces, destroying their apartments, is telling Palestinian students their identity doesn't exist. They're actually Jordanian. If you talk about your identity, you're actually an anti-Semite. And now some states saying that if you want to become a German citizen, you must pledge allegiance to genocide and apartheid. That's where Germany is at right now. For all their education about learning about what leads to fascism, they're going into fascism just like a lot of Western Europe. But like I said, the irony is they're using their past of fascism to actually silence dissent against this fascism. Germany is not okay. Germany is going full Nazi again. And it's using their past history of Nazism to do this. And it's just another depressing episode in Western Europe increasingly going far right because of the failure of our capitalist leaders and how they use issues like this to either whip up hysteria or silence criticism, or in the UK, destroy someone like Jeremy Corbyn. But anyway, that is it for the video. Like I said, demonetized. So consider supporting me on Patreon if you want more videos like this. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.